Agriculture is a human act. For thousands of years, human beings have chosen the most useful crops for their needs. Over generations, people controlled and selected the plants that allowed them to cope with the environmental challenges that they and their animals faced. The challenges in each area were different. When needs changed, the people were able to turn back to the abundant wild varieties and choose again. Many crops developed to feed animals and people, each with their own unique characteristics. Useful seeds were stored against drought and famine and the unproductive months of the year. The process was slow and natural. But in the 21st century, human numbers and needs have outgrown ancient methods. Demands of modern populations and markets are exceeding the productivity of the soil. Deforestation, desertification, and climate change are eroding the natural resources faster than agriculture's ability to provide. Traditional knowledge of nature and the land is being lost with social changes. At the same time, competition for land means more and more crop varieties, as well as their wild plant relatives, are dying out, leaving less choices for a world where the problems are getting larger. By establishing gene banks, modern science has shown the way for people to begin the vital process of preserving crops for the future. ILRI's state-of-the-art gene bank based in Ethiopia is one example. The seeds maintained in the ILRI Genebank have been assembled from many countries over the last 40 years. The collections were placed in trust under an agreement with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in 1994. In 2006, ILRI concluded an agreement with the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture to assure their future as a global public good. Along with partners in many countries, this gene bank works to internationally accepted standards of best practice and makes its material available to everyone for agricultural use. Its main focus is the plants used as food for animals and known as fodder and forage crops. These plants are often more vulnerable because market forces favor human food, and tropical forages are conserved by few other gene banks.
ILRI's gene bank is very diverse. We hold almost 19,000 different seed collections from many different countries of the world. In Forages, we have such a diverse collection. We have grasses, we have these herbaceous legumes, we have fodder trees, we have over 1,500 different species.
Many fodder and forage varieties have not been collected, while only a small proportion of the existing specimens have been fully researched.
Fodder crops are very important to developing world because most of these countries depend on animals for their well-being, their food and their clothing, sometimes even their transport. And therefore, having enough fodder crops for the animals is a very important element in their economy. There is increasing trade between developing and developed countries. Quite a bit of that trade is in animal products. Countries such as Botswana, who depend on meat, export quite a lot to developed countries. So developed countries have a role to play in seeing to it that fodder crops are preserved.
the world needs to protect these plants, but will only really benefit from them through research that defines their qualities.
The ILRI Genebank has been used to identify different types of fodder that have traits that are useful for farmers. The best example of this is Napier grass, an important fodder used by farmers throughout Eastern and Central Africa.
Tũgĩthomithio nĩgetha tũhande thara handũ ha gũkorwo tũtũndĩ na nyeki ya gũtũgũta tũkahe ng'ombe. Thĩinĩ waikara wakorwo na thara ũcio wakũrĩrĩria ta mĩaka 4.
Warĩ mũrimũ tondũ ũngĩathire mũgũnda gũtua thara rĩ, ũgũtua gĩcigo kĩnene mũno ĩkaigania thara tondũ he thara ũracagũra ũgatika kũu.
20 years ago, a new disease called smut started to devastate this Napier grass. The collaboration between the ILRI Genebank and the Kenyan Agricultural Research Institute started screening the lines of Napier grass being held in the gene banks, and 2 varieties in the ILRI Genebank were discovered to have resistance to this disease. So these were evaluated and then propagated and made available to farmers.
Nĩ harĩ na ũtiganu mũnene mũno. Wa mbere, kerĩ, wahe ng'ombe ĩna iria rĩingĩ.
Not only does ILRI store multiple types of the main tropical forages gathered from around the world, but it also maintains unique collections of African plants. Research could therefore reveal varieties that are better adapted and more productive, so allowing people to meet current and future environmental challenges.
With climate change, a lot of people are expecting that we're going to have more drought. One of the really key things about the material in the ILRI Genebank is that we have an excellent collection of drought-resistant material from the Sahel, from the drier parts of southern Africa, Namibia, Zimbabwe. So we know that there must be genes for drought resistance in this material. And this is just a huge source of diversity which is just waiting for discovery, and is a tremendous resource not only for now but also for the future, to allow systems to adapt to either climate change or changes in temperature, changes in soil fertility. We will find diversity within our collection that's adapted to all of these things.
The ILRI Genebank preserves these fodder and forage varieties. Additional research will extract their helpful genes and combine them to produce plants that are useful to farmers everywhere.
Once the major crops like rice and wheat and maize, which millions of people depend on as their major food source, once that's taken care of, then money will then start to flow down to foragers. Genebanks working alone can only hope to do so much, but when we have collective action through the system-wide programme, we're able to achieve so much more.
The international community is realizing that the preservation of crops is important. A large vault dug deep into Arctic ice is opening in 2008. This global effort is supported by the Norwegian government and the Global Crop Diversity Trust. It aims to protect the world's food plants from future catastrophe. Most of ILRI's fodder and forage crop samples will be duplicated for storage in this natural freezer.
This vault will hopefully house around 3 million different plant collections. Now it's hoped that this will encapsulate most of the diversity in the gene banks around the world as backup, so that you have that material duplicated and safely collected in one place. And in addition to that, they hopefully will bring in some of the other global diversity that is out there that the gene banks just have not been able to collect and house.
The preservation of animal food plant biodiversity in a world where livestock products are increasingly in demand is vital. It is key to ensuring that all countries have options in the future.
The gene banks are extremely important in terms of conserving and the sustainable use of biodiversity in a general sense. But of course, ILRI's specific role within this has been on retaining forage genetic diversity. And the forages are absolutely critical to livestock production, livestock development. There are very few institutions globally which are conserving forage genetic resources.